Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Age of Quarantine. I'm your host, Chris Enriquez. If you like what you see and you want to watch past episodes, including this past Sunday's 3-hour episode, which was a tribute to Riley Gale, rest in peace Riley, from Power Trip, all of the episodes are on YouTube. Some of them still have to get up there. Most of them are on my personal YouTube channel if you just look up Chris Enriquez. And the other episodes that were hand selected by Revolver Magazine are on the Revolver Magazine YouTube channel. Anyway, tonight is a very exciting episode because I will be joined by a very good friend of mine who goes by the alias Svrt. Svrt is a multi-talented dude who has done scores for films. He's played guitar in black metal bands like Black Anvil. He's played in bands like Widows Pact, where he also did some vocals. And his most recent project, Contracult Collective, I'm going to make sure that I got that correct because, I want to make sure I'm marketing the band properly. But yes, Contracult Collective is his latest project, and as you can hear in the background, they are doing some exciting things. This is their cover of Hole's Violet, and they had a couple other singles out on Spotify and on all streaming. The latest single, It's the Water, is fantastic if you haven't checked it out yet. And I can't wait to speak with him to go deeper into his musical history and background. So thanks for joining us tonight, and we're going to get Svrt on the screen. Hey, how are you?
Doing all right, Chris. How are you?
Very good, man. Thanks for joining us tonight on Age of Quarantine.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So how you been managing to get through the pandemic and all this craziness, man?
Writing a lot of music. We pretty much have another record in the bag now, so that was productive. We managed to scrape together 2 videos through it because our release schedule was pretty much just starting when all this kind of came about. I don't know, exercising a lot, reading, watching good movies.
Yeah, man, I feel you. It's a great time to focus on, I guess, like, the world stops and it gives us an opportunity to kind of focus on ourselves, whether it be creative or personal health and stuff like that, mental, physical. Yeah, I mean, obviously I mentioned that we have a personal history as being friends. How is physical health, which I know is a big deal for you with Muay Thai and also just the general training, how does that kind of play into you as a performer, being that your stage presence, especially with Contracult, is pretty physical?
The Muay Thai and the strength training and all that definitely helps to kind of keep the cardio moving. And I don't know, it's really helped a lot with like breathing techniques and everything as far as singing goes. I started doing the Bruce Dickinson thing of like running on the treadmill and trying to do the set that way, which is almost impossible. But
I always wonder how those guys do that. Like Axl Rose and Dave Grohl and all these guys, they're always running around. Some of them have guitars. It's an interesting point. So I wanted to take this we have an hour, so we're going to use this to kind of go into your personal history and your music history, whatever you're comfortable sharing with us. And anybody watching, if anyone should have questions, there's a question mark box on the bottom of the screen. We'll try our best to get to those. You mentioned that you've been staying productive during this time. I know you're in LA. Before we get into your personal history, what's the climate out there like in terms of, with all the insanity happening right now? What's the vibe out there?
a little clearer today, but it's been smoky. It's been pretty bad, honestly. I mean, I haven't seen the air quality this bad in Los Angeles for a really long time. And I mean, I think like about a week ago, like it was hard to even step outside just to go to the grocery store or anything.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, obviously stay safe out there and sending positive vibes to everybody out on the West Coast. You relocated to LA recently. Did you actually grow up in New York though?
Yeah, I
Okay.
did.
How do you feel? I mean, obviously I'm from here too. It's no secret that both New York and LA have such a rich history and all different types of subcultures and yeah, I hate the word entertainment, but you know what I mean. How do you feel New York kind of played a role in you as a creative person growing up here?
I think it played a huge role. I mean, there's so much energy and vibrance of the city. And I mean, it was the first place I got really heavily deep into music and grew up going to shows at ABC No Rio and CBGB's, which I think, and, hanging out on St. Mark's Place and in like some of the early loft apartments that were having shows like Croutons and 538 in the early days. And I think that significantly played a huge role in like all my music development. And then, eventually getting into like local goth scene and the club kind of thing. And like, it's just so much, there's such a fierce pulse there and an energy that keeps everybody moving creatively.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I think that also speaks volumes to Saint Vitus, obviously,
Yeah.
which not to sort of get off track, I feel really embodied a lot of the clubs and parties and things that you were just talking about. Because for folks like us growing up and going to these clubs that are no longer around, like ABC No Rio and CBGB's, and we should mention Limelight since you mentioned goth parties. It's really cool that we have a place like St. Vitus, where I think you and I probably would have never met if it wasn't for St. Vitus. Yeah, for sure, for better or for worse. But the going back to your early days and upbringing, what are your earliest memories of sort of like realizing that music was playing a big role in your life? I mean, I'm not even talking about learning how to play an instrument yet or getting into underground music, just like maybe your first memories of being like, oh shit, like I think this is the path that I want to take. This speaks to me. It's doing something.
Well, guitar was one of my first words. I was always really interested in guitars. My dad played guitar. Him and my uncle had a band together. So I grew up kind of seeing that a lot, and I decided to start playing when I was 9, and that was like that was when I really it really sunk in that it was something I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And yeah, I guess just like I grew up around a lot of music all the time. Like my folks always played music in the house. They always listened to music. They always liked good stuff. Like I was exposed to a lot of early rock and roll, and then like even like contemporary bands of the 90s that like my father was really into. He was always really up on like current music and everything, constantly reading Rolling Stone and Spin and Mojo and all that. Always buying CDs, always bringing them over to the house, always playing the old stuff, new stuff, just things he thought I would like and relate to.
And when you learned how to play guitar at 9, well, so that's pretty self-explanatory. But as far as finding your voice as a vocalist, when would you say you started to sort of develop that part of your talent?
I was singing as soon as I started playing guitar, and then like one of my earliest memories of music was like I got together with some kids when I was like around 12 years old, and they really did not like me as a vocalist at all, and really like hated my lyrics, hated me as a vocalist, hated me as anything else besides a guitar player. So it wasn't until like a long time from there that I started like thinking about my vocals even beyond that. And then like I had a band in high school. This is probably like my first like relatively serious band. Like we actually did a tour and we actually like played a good grip of local shows and everything in the punk scene. And like I never like it was all, I never sang melodically through that. I never And I mean, mostly because I was just like afraid to, and I still had that like that trauma from being like 11 and having someone tell me how much I suck. So just, like,
Yeah, man.
really, I just didn't really think like I didn't think I deserved it or something. Like it just wasn't. It wasn't something that I felt like and also like it wasn't necessarily relative to the music that I listened to at that time and what I was playing, and I was just like into, you know, I mean, for whatever reason, anything with melodic vocals for the most part was just not my thing and not the thing that I thought I was supposed to do at that time. So really it wasn't until I started this band that I actually thought like, okay, I can, you know, I can sing a little bit. Maybe I should try it in a band.
Yeah, no, I was really, that was the first time I heard you sing melodic, and then I want to get to Contracult Collective as we kind of go throughout the journey here. But going back, you know, sticking with that time period, when and how did you come to discover underground music? Maybe you could kind of elaborate on some of the first shows, first records, and may as well sort of talk about like who some of the most impactful artists were on you as you were kind of developing.
Yeah. I started getting into, oddly enough, like the first music that I really got into like really strongly as a genre at the time and really developed myself in was like early disco and early 70s rock for some strange reason. Like Kiss were like my favorite artists in the world. Like Barry Gibb was one of the reasons I started playing guitar. And then I remember this one year at summer camp, there was this real punk rock kid that was there, and he busted into my my bunk. Like, you got a CD player? Can I play this real quick? And he just wanted to like play it, and his friend wanted to listen to it, and it was A New Kind of Army by Anti-Flag.
Okay, okay.
For some reason, like, that record really stuck with me and fucked me up. And then he turned me on to a lot of other punk rock at that time. So like at that time, like he was really into like NoFX and Casualties and The Unseen. So like he turned me on to all that stuff. And then I kind of like dived really hard into that. And I thought he was so cool. So we hung out like outside of summer camp after that. And I'm like, hey, I'm into all these bands now. I got some shirts, I got some patches, like some bondage pants. I'm ready to go. And he came back to me and was like, that shit's whack. You don't want to listen to that. Like, it's all about nausea and tragedy and From Ashes Rise and all these like kind of like, more cruster bands. So I dived into that and then got like really into that scene of underground music. And like, I started going to ABC No Real a lot. I think that was like kind of the place that really got me going of like, you know, so the place that ruined my life essentially.
Yeah, that was a real fucking spot, man. A lot of memories from that place.
Same.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then from there, you know, I kind of made the natural progression of like metal and hardcore. Like, I didn't really get so into certain early industrial that's like more. I mean, I Inch Nails and like definitely was into early Manson. I didn't really get like so enveloped into that until a little bit later on, like my early 20s and like late teens, so to say. But I did get really into bands like Mindless Self-Indulgence, who were local, and I just thought were so bizarre and cool and like nothing I'd ever heard before. And also like, I don't know, like really openly queer and like wild, and like they had such a like cool fan base, and their shows were so fun. And then I was really into this band Atari Teenage Riot too, and those were,
I used to love Atari Teenage Riot. Yep.
yeah, and those are kind of the early bands where I like heard this really nice mesh of like electronics with like just sheer aggression and just like power and energy behind it, that kind of, I think those were kind of like the precursors to like me really wanting to do a band like I do now.
Sure, and also it's very clear, knowing you and what you do, that there must have been something about the theatrics that because we'll get into Black Anvil and Contracult Collective, but both of those bands, there is some kind of aesthetic is the best word I can kind of throw out there, but which honestly, you could say the same thing about punk rock. I would say maybe, depending on who you're talking to, hardcore. I mean, same with metal, but hardcore probably is really, out of anything we just spoke about, the only genre of music where you're just kind of looking at guys that look like they just left a construction site, right? Where there's not too much involved in the outfit. But so that's interesting because you mentioned your first band. What were your initial experiences starting your first band, performing, and all that? Because I know I discovered you as a musician in White Widows Pact, but I know there were things you were doing before that as well.
I think my first like real band was this band called Idiot Box when I was about 12 years old, and we started. It was me and a few friends I met at the same summer camp that I discovered punk rock at. And we started out like we were really huge fans of early Incubus, so we started out like as a tribute to that sort of stuff, up to probably like I don't know if you're like up to like the Science era record.
Sure.
Started writing our own stuff, and I think it was kind of like the moment where I discovered punk rock. So I was kind of like coming off of like the funk and disco like interest in music and going into that. So I sort of tried to, my dream was like I wanted to be like Curtis Mayfield meets Anti-Flag.
I mean, that's pretty fucking rad.
Yeah, and we did that band for like a few years, and I mean, for being 12 years old, we played a grip of shows, like, we did some stuff. And then, I kind of just I sort of grew out of that a little bit, and then that's when I started Terror Level Red with Lucas, who plays drums in Funeral Leech, plays drums.
He was on our show last week with David. Yeah.
Yeah, so he went over some of this already. Following that, like I was in that band for about 4 years. We had that band from like 14 to 18, and then I moved out to Olympia, Washington, where I went to college, and I started a band out there that I was in for a little while called Sixes, which actually features Jeff Caffey, who plays bass in Angel Dust.
Okay. Yeah, that's another band we want to get on the show, actually.
Yeah. And then I moved back, and that's when Lucas and I like formed up again to play music, and we started Grudges. And
that's right, Grudges. I remember Grudges. Yeah.
And that was fun. That was kind of us wanting to do a band that's like, I call it like Sweden meets New York, or like Nazem meets Madball.
Okay. Yeah. No, and that's an interesting topic to eventually get into, Black Anvil, for sure, because there's a connection between hardcore and black metal there.
Big time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then White Widows Pact, which is where I met Culprit, and we ended up starting this band.
Now, with White Widows Pact, I saw you guys a bunch of times. That was kind of like where I got to know you as a person and as a musician a little bit better. You guys, well, first of all, it was the beginning of your relationship with Culprit, and he is in Contracult Collective, and you guys seem to have a chemistry between you that I think may have started there. Am I wrong, or had you worked with? Okay, that was the beginning of it.
No, that's totally how we met, how we were introduced.
I actually did not know that you guys met through the band. I thought there was some history there, but
Dave.
Yeah, Dave Castillo, obviously co-host of the show here and owner of St. Vitus. He was in the band. For anyone watching that may not be familiar, you could look up White Widows Pact, and there's some great videos online, and also a bunch of stuff streaming online. But Yeah, talk about that band, how it started, and you know what the overall experience was like. Obviously, you ended up putting out a record on New Damage, based in Canada, and I know you did some tours with Madball, Shai Hulud, and probably a few others I'm forgetting. But it was a pretty cool, short-lived band. But you know, I think you know, it deserves some talk on the show, obviously.
Yeah, for sure. Um, at the time, I was playing in Grudges, and I was actually working at St. Vitus as a bouncer, and um, we had played what was it? Grudges had played at Vitus like a few months before I started that job with Black Anvil, actually. And I met Dave. That was the first time I had met Dave because he booked the show and he was really, really friendly and said he was into the band and everything. And then he came back around when I was working there, and we started talking and became friends, and you know, talked about music a lot. And out of nowhere, he just said, I want to start a band." He said a hardcore band, which I think we were a little more than a hardcore band, but you know,
Yeah.
it was an easy draw at the time. He's like, "Let's start a hardcore band. I got an idea." And he told me about Nick, and I'll never forget this because this is a funny story. But I remember the first email exchange that we had. He introduced me and Colt in an email together, and I was writing to him, not really knowing him before, understanding his sense of humor, and I'm like, "Hey man, like, let's talk. I'm gonna be the guitar player of this band. Like, maybe you wanna. I'm thinking like we could tune to this tuning, like drop C or something, and like I play this kind of guitar. What do you think?" And he wrote me back, and he goes, said, "I've never tuned to a drop tuning. ... ever. ... Who's this pretentious metalhead asshole that Dave's trying to get me into a band with?" But we met. We started that band. We recorded an EP like pretty early on to when we first started jamming with this guy Dean Baltalonis, who we had all had a history with at the time. Like my first band recorded with him. Dave had recorded with him in Primitive Weapons. Chili, who was playing drums for us, was in a band called Ghost Cube that also recorded them. And I had interned at his studio for a few years. So it was it was fun. It was like kind of a nice little like reunion for all of us. Like the chemistry was really there. We were really stoked on the music we were writing. We did that like EP, toured a little bit on that. I think that was when we did the Earth Crisis Shai Hulud run.
You guys were signed at that point, right?
No, we did that one ourselves, and then we met. And then when we played in Canada, I think Toronto on that run, and that's when like we met some of the New Damage people, and they wanted to work with us, and we wanted to do another record. So we started working with them. Recorded the set, the full length with Dean again, and I don't know. Truth be told, it wasn't like I don't think the record really had a proper release, unfortunately. Like
For sure, yeah.
The A&R we were, it's classic tall tale. Like the A&R we were working with on that label was leaving the label as.
That's always the story. I feel like every single musician has that same story. That's been on a label or was about to get a break or something, or did get one and then the fucking guy left or whatever,
Totally.
Which release had the song that everyone knew best that I loved was featuring Brendan from Incendiary.
El Morano.
That's right. And was that on the full length or the EP? It's been a while.
That was the EP.
That was the EP. Okay, yeah. Great song. Also a great video. Anybody watching that hasn't checked that out. Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah, actually we did do a vinyl release with the label on that called Panic Records.
Okay.
At Seattle, which was same kind of thing. A little bit of.
Yeah, so you kind of cut your teeth for a while doing a bunch of stuff early on. And I'm guessing, well, you had toured before. I'm guessing this was like your first foray into like being on any label of any kind, even though it wasn't like, you know, this like grandiose thing? And then at what point does, well, let's stick to that for a second, because when did you realize that there was some kind of personal and music chemistry between you and Culprit? Because obviously the partnership between you guys on guitar has lasted quite a while now, and you guys are obviously also very close friends.
I mean, pretty early on, you know, I think we all sort of meshed really well. And like in the very beginning, like early stages of the band, we were writing everything together. And then when we did the full length, I mean, realistically, I think there was some scheduling thing. Then like we, you know, did the classic thing of like booking recording time before the whole thing was fucking written. And so most of the full length was just the two of us. So we just became really good friends. And you know, he's incredibly easy to get along with. He's great to work with musically. He really thinks outside the box, like on, you know, business matters and creative matters and everything. And I guess like during that process, it just sort of came up that we like, I mean, at the time, like I was definitely like involved and developed in the goth scene and everything. And then we kind of got to talking like more about that genre of music, and he mentioned like, oh, I love that metal industrial sound. Like I love like industrial music guitars. And he's talking, you know, he brought up bands like Fear Factory and Frontline Assembly, and
Yeah, it's very specific type of industrial sound, you know,
yeah.
with that's heavy on the guitars for sure.
And like no one was really doing it at the time, so we just kind of had this. We had this idea of like let's give this a shot. Like let's just see where it goes. Like we'll do this, you know, as like a side project. I really wanted to front a band too. I'd never gotten the opportunity to do that. So yeah, I mean, early days was just like I bought an MPC and started messing around with it. We started writing stuff, and I think that was like obviously like I knew he could write really metal riffs, but I think that was like one of the I think that was the moment where I think we both like saw each other like even more musically, and like really saw each other's potential, and like
Yeah,
like this was gonna be a combination.
absolutely. And then in the, I mean, you know, we're talking about the New York City. I think we should just call it the New York City scene, because it's not just Brooklyn; it's the overall scene. Starts, you know, we've seen changes throughout the years, and certainly like the goth, you know, the goth industrial scene has always existed here and has been a big thing. I can remember as early as the early 90s, you know, having a sister that worked at Limelight, been exposed to that world. And but I think there was a resurgence for sure that took place. You know, it's kind of like metal and punk and hardcore. I felt like aggressive music kind of peeked its head back in and became cool at some point, maybe in I'm gonna say like 2008, 2007. It really started to become this thing where now St. Vitus pops up, and then the goth industrial thing really started to sort of take prominence in the past few years. And so it's interesting. I'm just kind of, it's not a question, I'm just kind of stating an obvious thing that's cool about the evolution that sort of goes by as you're also kind of evolving as a musician and progressing. When does Black Anvil happen? Because that's also a huge part of your musical path in between the two projects.
Sure. Well, Black Anvil was happening a long time before I even moved back to New York. I think I first became aware of Black Anvil one of the times I came home for summer, Christmas or something. Lucas and I hung out, and he showed me I think it was their first record, and he's like, Kill Your Idols guys are in a black metal band now. Here's the record. And we threw it on, and like, this is legit, it's good. And I became a fan of it then, and Grudges played a couple shows with them, and then it wasn't until they asked me to do a tour. They asked me to do a tour back in like I want to say 2012, possibly, with
Okay.
like they got thrown last minute on like a couple dates with Watain, because I think there was like some kind of visa issue, and Watain had missed a couple shows on the Decibel tour that they were supposed to do, and yeah, so they had like Gary, who was playing guitar at the time, they were a three-piece at the time, and Gary was playing guitar, couldn't really tour too much, so like they had been sort of known for getting other people to fill his spot, and it was between me and Jeremy, who ended up joining the band.
Right. Both of you guys are playing guitar together currently.
Yeah, and he's a significantly better guitar player than me, so he obviously got the gig over me, and he did the run with them, and then they became a four-piece, and he ended up joining. And we all stayed in touch. Like I would make an occasional swing by Guitar Center and see Rafe and stuff, and he'd still mention it to me that like, said, we're gonna have to tour again. We're gonna need somebody. Like, we still talk about you playing with us and everything, because I've been seeing Paul, Rafe, and Gary's bands like since I was a teenager, and
We should remind everybody that this is Paul, Gary, and Ray from Kill Your Idols, and also Death Cycle.
Yep.
Legendary guys from the New York scene in punk, hardcore, and metal. Then they were doing Black Anvil. I remember at a time, because I don't know. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe back in the day, I don't think that New York was exactly known for black metal bands. We're known for punk and hardcore, right? So, I remember when Black Anvil started, people were scratching their heads. Like, what are these guys doing? Really, before places like St. Vitus and other New York bands were kind of jumping on the train, so to speak. So I think they were kind of, I think Black Anvil kind of were one of the first to kind of have the balls to just be like, we're putting on, we're going to be a black metal band, and this is our vibe. This is what we want to do,
I'd say them, and shout out to Mutilation Rights, because I think they definitely paved the way for that.
For sure, yeah.
So I ended up jumping in on a tour they did with Skeleton Witch and Ghoul, and had a blast. Like, that really became like family for me, just from 3 weeks of being on that. And I think that was definitely the first time I'd ever done like that kind of like package metal touring too, and really liked that. Made good friends on that tour that I still really close to now. And then I did a European tour with them like a few months later, them and Tombs. And then
Did you say with Tombs?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Yeah, hell yeah. Love those guys. Mike Hill is our guest this Friday on the show. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Right on. Yeah, and then before they I think right before they went to record As Was, they told me Gary was leaving the band and asked if I wanted to become a full-time member. So
that's awesome. And you did some really great shit with them, man.
Thank you. Yeah, I did.
Yeah, Black Anvil went through a couple of lineup changes. I think it really kind of like turned into its own thing. It went from being like the ex-Kill Your Idols band to its own band finally. And, we had Paul on the show, who, is also a New York native. I mean, it's a true New York band, which I think is interesting because it's not a typical New York band. And let's talk, you did some really cool tours with Black Anvil, but with White Widows Pact also. So it's interesting to kind of see like the different kind of things you got through. So I always think that going on tour as a musician and the underground music is kind of like going to college, depending on how lucky you are. Like we kind of skipped over the fact that you toured with Madball. I'm sure you had some stories there, but having gone on tour with Madball and then Watain and Tombs and I was going to bring up Mayhem, which I know you did, which is crazy.
I didn't, so I don't have any stories about that. But
oh, okay, my bad. But yeah, still great. A lot of great stuff to kind of go through as you're going through your musical journey. Now, are you still with Black Anvil technically, even though you relocated? Okay.
yep,
What's going on with the band?
lives in California too, so we're a bi-coastal band somewhat now.
Yeah, I feel that a lot of bands are these days, including my own. What's the what's the temperature on Black Anvil right now? What you know, obviously we're in limited you know, times of what we can do, but you know, anything happening that you can share?
Well, we signed to Seasons of Mist.
Congrats.
Yeah, thank you. And have a whole new record like ready to go, ready to be recorded. I think the hopes and expectations of how we wanted to do the record are, you know, not available right now necessarily. So I think we might have to go about it some unconventional ways. We haven't had like a real conversation about how we're gonna go about this, but I'm hoping, you know, sometime either early next year or like by the fall or winter or something, we'll be able to start tracking it.
Being functional. Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, nowadays with the way that you know, Pro Tools and all that, it's become, and you're a recording guy too, which I mentioned earlier on. You've been recording bands for quite some time, and also doing scores, which maybe we could talk about towards the end. I don't want to lose time on Contracult Collective, but so now, you know, let's talk about that, because you and Nick started your relationship. Obviously, we're starting to talk about your mutual interest in industrial music. When did Contracult started as Hogwash, if I'm saying that correctly? When did like all that come into fruition, where you're like, let's do this, man, let's just fucking make it happen?
I said it about like 3 years ago that we started writing stuff and piecing it all together, and then we released a tape like 2017, I want to say.
Okay.
I know someone's gonna tell me I'm wrong. And then yeah, we played a couple shows on that, went through a few like various lineup changes and like different ideas, and then recorded another demo to just sort of like pass around to some labels. Got some peaked interest from Roadrunner pretty early on, and started working with them, and like they were kind of helpful in some of the development of things. And thanks Colt. 2016 we did we released the tape, my bad. And yeah, it was long, you know, long label process, and they kind of came into new ownership, and people leaving, people joining, yada yada. We tried a few different producers, and finally kind of like found a home with Josh, and found something like found something that we liked.
Are you referring to Josh, the person that produced?
Yeah, Josh Schrader.
Got it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then that's like we had spent so much like downtime kind of like redeveloping the project from there that I think we just didn't really feel like Hogwash anymore. And that was sort of the moment where we moved on from that and became Contracult.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that, so thanks for bringing that up. So what was the I think that's a cool thing too, when you have a brand new band and you have the opportunity to kind of shape it into ideally what you want it to be. You know, you've already done all these bands early on. Why waste time not shaping it and making it as perfect as whatever you want it to be, right?
Yeah.
which explains a lot of the sort of figuring out what studio, what producer to go to. The band finally came out with music not too long ago. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it was it last summer?
No, we released our first round of singles in February of this
It
year.
was okay, man. Time is just sort of escaping me with what's going on. So obviously, you know what I mean. February actually doesn't seem that long ago because of how redundant everything has been. But you guys, the first thing you released was one of my favorite songs by Hole. One of my favorite '90s songs, Violet. I felt like you guys recreated it in such a interesting and unique way. Why that song? And yeah, go ahead.
Always been a big fan of the band. Always really loved what's the Live This is that
Move
record.
Through This is a
Yeah.
great record. It's definitely
Always,
their best.
always been a big fan of the band. Love that song. Love the record. I feel like we wanted to give like 90s covers were definitely becoming kind of a big thing in like active rock scene, and we were having some encouragement, I'll say, from the label to do something, do something that like could be pushed to that direction. And there's definitely some more contemporary bands that have like done covers from the 90s, and they've had good sense of it. And yeah, but mostly I just really like I wanted to do I thought there was something unique about like me being male and doing that cover as well.
Yeah, yeah. Vocally, it was great too because you were able. People never talk about Courtney Love's vocals, but or maybe they do, but they focus so much on her celebrity personality. You know, like her scream, her singing to screaming was unbelievable, and it doesn't get talked about a lot. And it helped, I think, highlight your own capabilities, which I don't know if that was anything you were thinking about when you were doing it, since you were stepping into that role of melodic vocals for the first time.
Yeah, it was definitely, I wanted to do justice to what it was, but I really wanted us to make it our own. I think it's so easy these days for artists to do covers of bands, and it sounds like if their band wrote the song in the exact same way and then covered it. Like there's no, there's not, a lot of times there's not like a big change in tempo or key or
Yeah,
or other kind of elements. And I really didn't want us to do that with this. I wanted us to make it our own while also just nodding to how great of a song it is.
I think the best covers are handled that way. Some of my favorite covers, not all hits, but Moby did a great cover of "Sailing On" by Bad Brains that is phenomenal, and you would never have thought that it was a Bad Brains song if you heard it. Probably a bunch of others that are escaping me, but yeah, it's great. And then I mentioned that there were a couple other singles that came out since then, and I know that it took a long time for the band to finally get to the point where you were comfortable releasing stuff, playing live. Sorry, "It's the Water" is the latest single, which is great, by the way. So that's been out since May, I know, for anyone watching that hasn't checked it out yet. But yeah, talk about what went into what went into recording all of the new material that you've been releasing. I know it took a really long time, and you have an EP coming out on Friday. So maybe talk about the creative process a little bit. I'd love actually to hear the creative process in general of how you guys work.
Well, as you said, like I produce and record bands, so I'm definitely able to like I have the luxury of we have the luxury of like basically putting our writing process into more of like a studio process, so to say. And that's just more of like the kind of band are, you know, we don't generally play with a drummer, and like we're not really like four guys getting into a garage. So yeah, it starts differently every time. You know, sometimes like it starts with a riff that Nick wrote. Sometimes I write a riff and like piece a song out. Like for the most part, like Nick has even come up with vocal hooks before. Like there's no real like, I don't know. There's no real ego with anything like that.
Sure, there's no template that you follow. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a very like 50-50 process. I mean, so I'm with that stuff, like we, you know, when we started working with Josh, like we sent him, we would send him like, I don't know, almost nearly hundreds of songs, and he'd
Wow.
listen to a lot of them, and I'd say that like there are some that like changed mildly in that process. Like, you know, he works as really as a producer, and that's what we like, and I enjoy that process. You know, I think there's many different ways to make a record. It's really up to your comfort and everything. But I think if you get a record produced by somebody, I think the process and like the purpose of a producer is really important. And I don't think that like so many of the great records we know and exist right now would exist without a producer. But then at the same time, like there are also good records that exist because a producer wasn't involved, and there's records that, you know,
Well, no, that's a very true statement. I mean, it's true. I mean, like, you know, you gotta give credit where credit's due. Siamese Dream likely would not be what it is without Butch Vig. You know, that's a true statement. You know, yeah,
yeah, or no.
Yep.
Yeah. And
so
yeah,
as you were saying, because you work with bands, you produce, you do a lot of stuff there, which is a great luxury to have. What can people expect from the live show? Because I know you played a few different performances in LA. You haven't really gotten the chance to tour yet, but are you planning on doing like pandemic performance, like you know what I mean? The people are doing like the live streams and stuff like that.
we'd love to. We've spoken to a few people. I don't really want to like drop anything right now because there's nothing, you know, I don't have anything to plug or advertise.
Sure.
There's a few people like within the scene in LA that are doing things and hosting shows and such, and we're in some conversations right now. We're just trying to kind of find the right piece of it, and also just make it as cool as possible, because it's such a different thing these days. And you know, I think it's actually cool and really I think it's like it's cool seeing the different ways that people do it. And like, I mean, so some people are really theatrical about it, where like some people, I mean, I was also, and then at the same time, I was really into the like Paul Stanley Checks In From Home series that started like at the beginning stages of this, which was just like, you know, a hardly audible recording from his phone. And yeah, but we're trying to, you know, we want to make it as cool as possible. And
it's actually really weird that you mentioned Paul Stanley, because I'm not even fucking with you. I was gonna quote Gene Simmons. I'm a huge Kiss fan, and he obviously, Kiss was a theatrical band, and he had made some comment. I can't get the quote correct, but about the '90s bands, as great as they were, how he wasn't a real fan of what was going on, because for him and for Kiss, it was all about not showing up in your street clothes. It was about putting on a show, you know.
Oh.
And yeah, and that's what Contracult is to me, from what I've seen of some of the stuff, the videos that you have out, and the imagery and the aesthetic. So I do hope that you guys can get something together to pull together a live show. Speaking of aesthetics and all that, I know we talked about some of your favorite bands growing up, but you know, while we still have time, maybe talk about some of your favorite front people. lyricist, vocalist that had some kind of impact on you? Because I know that you were very theatrical, and I'm just kind of curious as to like where you draw some of your influence from.
Sure. Um, Gene and Paul are big ones.
Yeah, man. I don't understand anyone that doesn't get behind that. I
Yeah.
don't. I think and it's surprising that you would say that because it's usually older people, and you know, anyone 40 and up will say that. Anyone 35 and below, they just don't get it. So props to you on that.
I saw Kiss. I saw Kiss when I was 10. And it completely changed my life. Like,
Wow.
so I'd hold them pretty high. David Gahan, Depeche Mode,
Right.
definitely a big one. I just think he writes such incredible, tasteful vocal hooks. He's great lyricist. Ogre from Skinny Puppy, really amazing, really creative, theatrical. Like, Trent Reznor, obviously. Somebody I was thinking about the other day on like more of the hardcore edge of things. Freddie Madball for sure. If we want we want to talk of a vocalist with fucking stellar cardio. I mean, good grief. Like
that's awesome. You just went from David Gahan to Freddie Madball. You know, that's something that's lost in. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm obviously going to be a little limited in my exposure to stuff because I'm turning 40 this year, unfortunately. But I was going to comment on like how you said something earlier about basically trying to blend an artist with you know Swedish music and New York music, and I feel like it reminds me of Jane's Addiction mentioning they wanted to be like Ella Fitzgerald or Otis Redding meets Bad Brains, and I love when bands.
I never heard.
Exactly. Yeah, it's fucking great.
But that makes me want to be a fan.
For sure. So let's talk about the EP a little bit. What's the name of the EP, and where can people pick it up? Obviously, I'm sure it's gonna be on all streaming.
Yeah, that's where that'd be where you could pick it up. We have some talks about a physical release. We just kind of want to see where the attention lies, and like if we do start working with another label anytime. Yeah, it's called Contracult Collective, Cult of Opposition. Comes out on Friday.
Awesome.
It's basically just it's just a more cohesive collection of the singles that have been released, and with a few other songs, and you know, just more of it's just a chance to kind of like listen to it as one seamless experience instead of like skipping around the songs.
And do you have any videos coming out? I know you just released a bunch, but are there any videos that will be coming out in the near future or anything like that?
No.
Okay. Sorry to put you on the spot.
That's okay. No, yeah. We kind of we spent a lot of time doing that, but we are following this up with another 2-song release that we did a couple songs with Arthur Risk a few years ago.
Oh yeah, great. I got to get him on the show. What a fucking gem.
Yeah, definitely. He's amazing. Shout out to Arthur, incredible producer, has worked with like has done every cool metal record you've heard in the last few years, and has even gone beyond working with artists like Ghostman and
That's right.
And yeah, he's incredible. So we're coming out. We're gonna drop those 2 songs. I'm hoping like around October, November time, and we'll definitely be doing another video for one of those. But
awesome. Yeah, and I'm obviously, when I asked you that, I should also point out, you know, who's making videos right now. Some people are, but it's just a tough time. So
easier to make a video than do anything else. I think it's
That's true. Yeah, that's cool. Everyone check that out. I'm really stoked that you guys are all able to release music during this time, because we all need it. I love that any artists are just kind of like, fuck it, we're gonna put shit out, because some people have been delaying stuff. But yeah. Dude, I want to thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it. Anyone that watched and tuned in, this is going to be on the St. Vitus IGTV in about 5 minutes. So if you missed anything and want to go back to the top, you can do that. And the whole interview will be up online on YouTube within the next week or so. So if you missed anything there and you want to find out what you missed, just search my name on YouTube, Christopher Enriquez. You can watch all the episodes there and on Revolver Magazine's YouTube channel. Are there any final comments, shout outs, or things you want to share with everybody before we wrap it up, dude?
Black lives still matter. Black trans lives still matter. Fuck the police. That's all.
Absolutely. And on that note, I want to also echo your sentiments, because we have a platform here that even if people hadn't tuned in live, will be able to watch it. It's evergreen, and it's an opportunity to just say, dude, vote in November, please, because this is such a fucked up time, and it would just suck if people stayed silent and just sat there. So it's a time to fucking really take this seriously and do something with your voice and use socials and everything that we have at our fingertips. It's great to promote ourselves, but it's cool to end on this note, because we could also use it for positive messages and things that are actually going to make a bigger difference. So yeah, man, thanks again. Love you, man. And I hope that after all this fucking bullshit is over, that we can cross paths and hang out in person at some point.
We will.
All right, brother. Talk to you soon.
Stay safe, man.
Peace. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. That was another episode of Age of Quarantine with Svrt from Contracult Collective. And we will be back tomorrow with General George from Clockwise. And on Thursday, I will be joined by Tom Mullen of Washed Up Emo. And on Friday, we will have Mike Hill from Tombs. And we have a lot of great episodes that you can check out on the St. Vitus IGTV, including the 3-hour tribute to Riley Gale from this past Sunday. Go on YouTube, search Christopher Enriquez, search Revolver Magazine. You'll find all the Age of Quarantine stuff. We got some great stuff coming next week. You guys are awesome. Stay safe and vote in November, please. Peace.